Educating, informing, serving. Fact TV, keeping government honest.
And it is 1 minute past 6 o'clock, and this is a combined meeting of the Wyndham Northeast Unified Elementary School District. It's locked. Thank you. We have a member that we're preventing from coming in. Hold on just a second. This is a meeting of the Wyndham Northeast Unified Elementary School District, meeting jointly with the Westminster Town School Board. I'm Jack Breyer. To my immediate left is the chair of the Westminster Board, Cheryl Charles. This is my call to order. I am going to make one adjustment before we get even started, and that is that there should always be a 1A of introductions. I think that we do video record this. People ought to know who it is that's talking, so they can make fun of them. Why don't we start to my immediate, to my immediate left.
I'm Ricky Adams, our technology director.
And going down.
I'm Charlie Hutchison, Westminster School Board member.
I'm Jack Breyer, and I'm chair of the Westminster. I'm chair of the Westminster. I'm chair of the Unified School District in Grafton.
I'm Cheryl Charles, chair of the I'm a board member with the
Liz Hardy, principal at Westminster Center School.
Angela Cartier, principal at Grafton Elementary School.
And would our people, who are our members who are remote, speak up? Why don't we start with you, Lynn?
I'm on the Athens board.
And Elise?
Hi, I'm Elise Manning Sterling, and I'm part of the Unified, represent Westminster on the Unified School Board.
And you, Melissa?
I'm also Melissa Carlstrom. I am on the Unified School Board representing Westminster.
All right. And is there anyone else that wishes to be introduced? We can do that. David Major, I understand, will be here. Did he just walk in the door? Mm-hmm. All right. Well, then we'll open the door and let him in as well.
There he is, perfect.
David, we were doing introductions, and we've been waiting breathlessly, impatiently for you to sit down and introduce yourself. We weren't going to go further without it.
Shall I introduce myself?
You shall introduce yourself, otherwise I can't move to item 3.
Okay, I'm David Major, Westminster School Board member.
All right, so now we're on to item 2, which is adjustments to the agenda. Are there any adjustments that people would like to make to the agenda as written?
I, Jack, have a request for payment from the town of Westminster.
Well, we will have that as, we can put that as an item under new business. It'll be a 7C, Westminster funding request. Let me just say also, we are going to spend hopefully not a laborious amount of time going over what the budget planning process is under B, and I would like to have at least a very brief discussion under 7C, and we'll just call it buildings and grounds, just in a very brief way, prep for the meeting. And yes, Cheryl?
Do we need to add an item that has to do with taking action on the COVID-related policy that was passed by the supervisory union?
Thank you,
night?
and absolutely. So make that a 7D. In fact, that was, we have back and forth. That is new business because the policy is new.
So 60.
60, excuse me. Thank you. And I believe that is
No more introduction.
yes, and one more, we're coming back to one more introduction. Take a very short seat of honor, Andy, and introduce yourself.
Hello, hi, I apologize for it. Took a little longer than I thought. Andy Haas, I'm the interim superintendent at WNUESD.
Yeah. Welcome to our the most distant part of your empire. Well, Andy, we're just making some adjustments to the agenda. A sensitive point, as you pointed out, we need to study this up a little earlier than 20 minutes beforehand. We've added a 6C, which is a request by Westminster to be compensated for the last election, and a 6D, which is the policy thing we all enjoyed discussing last night. Also, I've added, and this will be very brief, so there's no surprise on this, a 7C, which is facilities, because I want us to have that as part of the sort of discussion about budgets and about sort of where the priorities are. And I would also just let you know that I will try not to be laborious about it, but I want to do a fairly detailed review of what budgets are, because as I said last night, I really want other people to be doing this for a whole variety of reasons, not the least of which is I really would like to not be at least as far as the high school is concerned, not be on that next year and possibly think about this year for this board as well. All right, so that's it. We're on to communication and public comment. I see we have one member of the public. Is there anyone that would like to comment, and how do we tell who? Ricky, are you tracking that?
Yeah, there's no hands or anything.
All right. Well, if you do want to speak, just unmute yourself and say hello, and otherwise we're going to move on. Everybody must be incredibly satisfied with what we're doing, which I find shocking. All right. Item 4 is review and approve a board minutes for September 13th. And I will take a motion, and then I'm going to recess for a minute so that the Westminster can do what they need to do in this regard. So I'm looking for a motion to approve the minutes for the 13th. Is anybody besides me able to look at them?
So moved.
Excellent. Any discussion? Any objection? Then they are approved without objection. Moving on to reports. 5A is the, yes, oh, I'm sorry, that's right. That was exactly, I just said that's what I was going to do, and I forgot. Thank you. So,
Let me ask if there are any comments or concerns or questions about this in the next. I actually don't know that. Yes, we do. Sure. Let me take a vote. Let me ask. Mr. Major?
I approve.
Okay. Mr. Hutchinson? Okay, thank you. So approved as well, Jack. Thank you.
yeah, so you can, in small boards, just ask for objections and then say approve without objection. Just make it easy on you.
Thank you.
All right. Do you have any adjustments to your agenda?
No,
All right.
we covered those jointly.
All right, cool. Then next up is 5A, interim superintendent report. What do you got for us?
Would you like me to repeat my report from last night?
That's a good point. I think that probably when we do these going forward, if there are things that you want to make sure everybody hears, they're worth repeating. Otherwise, I'd probably focus just on the items that affect your local district.
Yeah.
I think that's just more merciful and also more granular.
Well, I will say it's been a whirlwind. I think this is day 11. I'm not counting, and learning new things every day. But what is really exciting is we opened schools on time. Kids were back. It was great to see kids back in the building. Unfortunately, right after being put into this position, we had to shut a few things down that affected the Union Elementary districts due to COVID. But I think anecdotally, one of the things that I found really great to see was I actually was coming here to speak with Angela regarding the time when she was dealing with the issue of when you ended up shutting down the whole building and walking in here. A student was having to leave with their parent. They had just shown up and was being told to go home, and the child crying, saying, "But I want to go to school," you know, and that's what we want. We want kids to be in school, and so, you know, it was really touching just to see that piece. You know, as I reported yesterday, Westminster Center Schools had 3 positive cases to date. It's had to shut down 4th grade classroom, 5th grade, pardon me, can't see it on here, and both of the kindergarten classrooms. And then Grafton Elementary has had 3 positive cases, and that started with trying to do contact tracing, and it ended up having to shut down the whole school for a period of time. But what has been, I have to hands off to both Liz and Angela for how they've handled things and talking with parents and walking through there, and also with, I'm going to butcher it, but with Desi, and then also Megan. The school nurses have done just an outstanding job on communicating, the communication up to me. They keep me up to date of what's going on. So it's been really helpful in that sense. We have had 3 positive cases at the middle school. That's just cases. It could be adults, could be students, but there has been some effect with some Grafton kids and probably some Westminster kids. And then we have had to do some quarantining at the high school due to close contact. I did get the numbers early this morning from Mr. Broadley. They've had 3 positive cases at the high school. So I mean, that's been the big piece. I mean, I think as far as staff vaccination rates, because that's been a big topic people have been asking about. Grafton is at 95%, and Westminster is at 94%. What came up yesterday was, you know, the question that came up last night was, why isn't it 100%? Well, because the schools are so small, if 1 or 2 persons, for whatever reason, can't be vaccinated or choose not to vaccinate, that's going to bring that number down faster just because of the size. So, the vast majority of staff are vaccinated, and that's a real good thing. We last night we introduced a memo of understanding to work with the union on vaccine mandates, and so we've been working throughout the day in between everything else. I've been working with the union on trying to work on that language, and I know some board members have been involved also working on that language. So I think we're going to have something to be able to present to board chairs by tomorrow.
So tomorrow rather than, I mean, I was worried that was going to get pushed.
No, I have to commend the association. When I got home last night, I worked on it and I sent it off to them, and they were working on it right away. They are very eager to have something in place. And then, Ricky Adams, our IT director, has been working on a submission form for folks to be able to, for employees to be able to submit their proof of vaccination securely, but also so that they don't have to come in and we don't have to take time away from the nurses, because the nurses are extremely busy doing other things, and we don't. So they can just upload their picture of a vaccination card, and then we have a database, and then we can work with the folks. Anyone who either doesn't upload, a vaccination card would be assumed to be unvaccinated, and so then we would work on the mandatory testing with that person. I did hear from Secretary French that today they are working on a system for testing similar to what Massachusetts has been using. It's maybe a month or two out, but it would help with keeping kids in school, where if students are considered a close contact but are asymptomatic, that they would be given this test that's a rapid test, sent home for that day. The next day, before they came into the building, they would take the same test. You do it for 7 days in a row. Every day that they're negative, they go to school. Yeah. And then if they're positive, obviously they go home. And there's some obviously logistics around that and trying to put that together, but it seems like that could be a better solution than trying to do our contact tracing the way we've been doing, which is laborious at best.
Questions?
Sure, I wasn't sure if you were going to go to anything else, but on this topic, Andy, first of all, thank you. And again, thanks to the principals and the nurses and all the staff. I have a question about our training to deal with things that happen suddenly. And the circumstance would be Tuesday at the Westminster School, where people were arriving, just as you described here in Grafton. And, suddenly somebody's allowed to go in the building and somebody else is turned away. What's our protocol for helping the staff people handle that in a way that's not traumatizing to children, that is as supportive as possible? I mean, we have these protocols that tell us what the rules are, but we don't talk about the human dimension of that impact on children and on teachers and others. So what are we doing about that is my question.
That's a great question. I think we could probably do a better job. And I fully believe that we all thought that we'd be walking back into school year here being closer to normal. And so those kind of pieces of the plan haven't been fully flushed out. All the principals have provided me with plans that they're working on, or if they have to flip to remote and stuff like that. But it's a good point. We haven't really thought about that piece of it, of how to have a counselor there also, possibly to work with a family if a student is having that issue. But the counselors, the school counselors, but also we have school-based clinicians in almost every building can be available, because we do have like a crisis team, so that if we had a crisis, we could look at that protocol and how we can massage it to kind of work on that.
I appreciate that answer, and I actually didn't expect that we'd be ready for this. I think I'm alerting us that there's a need for a little more support for our staff who are dealt with that situation and just need to be coached to stay calm yourself. It's scary. Remember how surprised the children are going to be, just all those kind of things that I don't think we're thinking explicitly enough about. Then another question has to do with, and I think we've begun to address it, but siblings. So we have one child able to enter the building and the other one is turned away. How do we, and now we're able to test them. I'm so pleased the surveillance testing has started now, and that everybody, including siblings, are going to be able to be tested. But was there any specific policy around siblings if one is quarantined and the other is not? Help me with that.
Yeah, policy I can't speak to, but I would defer back to the schools, because each school's handling it a little differently. So
what I've heard from my nurse and what I have followed is that if one sibling is considered a close contact and needs to quarantine, they do so. And if the sibling is not showing any symptoms, or if the child who was exposed, so for example, our kindergarten was closed on Tuesday, if one of those kindergartners has to quarantine and they're not showing symptoms, the close contact is not showing symptoms, then the sibling can come to school. But if the close contact is showing symptoms, then now the sibling has become a close contact as well. So then they would need to stay in quarantine. So that's what we have been following, and it's, you know, makes everyone nervous. The whole thing makes everyone nervous. But that's what I've been told by my nursing staff, and that's what we followed at Westminster. Sam, you've done something similar?
Yep. I see that Jessa has her hand up, and oh, by the way, we did introductions, but Jessa, we didn't introduce you. If you'd like to introduce yourself and then ask your question.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jessa West Clark from Grafton. My only question was that the Westminster school cases are not showing up on the state in-school case dashboard. It's still showing at 0 for Westminster. I'm not entirely sure the central ones were either, but I know Westminster definitely was not.
So I will admit that I don't know how that data gets uploaded, and I will have to research.
Check in with my nurse.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. So thanks for letting me
So
know.
it depends on the type of test that was done. The rapid tests don't get into the database, I don't believe. I think it's just the PCR tests that go into the database.
As a school case?
There's
Yeah, because we tried to submit from our school one case and it couldn't go through because they got a rapid test, and so it can't go into the database.
Ah, okay.
So there might be some discrepancies. There might not either, but.
Actually, there are quite a few discrepancies. I obviously have nothing better to do, so I tend to listen to the governor's conferences, and this has been an issue where there's been some real hammering because it's become increasingly clear that the data that the state's been using to track their comparative performance has got all the holes in it that some of our friends in Florida, Texas, and elsewhere have, and there are probably lots of cases that either were put in a month late or not put in at all. And let's just say that Dr. Levine was made very aware of that by a series of questions, and not that that's going to change anything.
If I could just, but I think your points, Cheryl, are good, and I think one of the things we need to do is go back and work up some literature around what you're asking about, and what we can provide to parents also, even if it's a handout at that moment of, you know, ways to talk to your child or something of that nature. We can do some feedback.
Yeah, I would suggest a handout as soon as possible, just alerting us to how because if people are aware that this might happen,
yep,
they'll just be that much better prepared.
Could I get clarification on
Yes.
what the protocol is when students arrive now at school? Do they all get a temperature taken, or what happens? No.
You just need a mask.
They just wear a mask. Yeah. So there's no.
They're prompted to hand sanitize as they come in, but you know, I've been at some of the schools, and it's very much like it feels somewhat normal, where kids are coming in, there's adults greeting them. You know, they're being reminded at one school that they were being reminded, you know, make sure you sanitize your hand, bless you. And so the kids are just doing it, grabbing a lunch, and.
So how would one child be turned away?
Well, I think what they were talking about is on Tuesday we had a case, and we learned about the case at 7:30. We confirmed what the close contact was, and students arrived at 7:45. Right. So we were greeting kindergarten parents with iPads saying, surprise, and here's an iPad, and we'll be in touch later today with more details. But so you know, here are some dates to be thinking about, and I will. You know, I was saying to families, I'm going to repeat this all in an email because people were shocked anyway. They're on their way to work. They're not expecting to have their child. It's all, and I think as parents, we've all been there where you have, you know, your car's warming up, but then your child is sick and you're like, ugh. So it was that magnified because they were at school. And so if they had a sibling, we were saying the sibling is safe to come if your child hasn't been showing any symptoms, but we'll be in touch.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, so, and thank you. And
If you don't mind, though, I just want to make sure we've covered everybody, because, you know, Elise, I haven't heard from you, I haven't heard from you, Lynn, and I do want to maintain the discipline of checking with each person about questions before we go to round two. Lynn, any questions?
I was just trying to finish with a series of questions. That's all.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to let you, I promise.
Okay.
Lynn?
I'm good.
Okay, Elise?
I'm just following the conversation and everything seems to be on track, so.
All right, floor is yours, Cheryl, sorry. Melissa's got her hand up, sorry, Melissa. Then.
Yeah, my question, I was curious why when there's a positive case in a classroom, the classroom is being closed completely for the quarantining period instead of allowing for the students to come back as they get their negative test results. Because my son was in the 5th grade class and he got his results way before the virtual learning was done. So he was cleared to go back to school, but there wasn't school for him. And I just think that I'm sure it has something to do with equity. And I'm curious because it puts families in a pretty big, challenging place if they were able to get test results, but still not send their kids back.
So Melissa, and I'll let the principals answer a little more granular, but I can tell you that from the guidance from the AOE and the Department of Health from when the 5th grade classroom had to shut down at Westminster to today have evolved and changed. So the decisions that were made back back 2 weeks ago on contact tracing, a memo came out on the 14th. So if you think, so on the 8th or the 9th, or whatever day that was, the next week we got a memo that told us how to respond to contact tracing completely different. But because of my transition into the office, we didn't get that memo. It was delayed to us a couple of days because it was sitting in the ether somewhere because it wasn't going to, because the secretary didn't have my email. So that was part of it, is trying to get that piece down. But I do also know that the nurses are using the latest data to figure out how to send kids home and what is the best protocol of keeping kids safe. But I know that principals have been dealing with it.
The other thing, Melissa, is that, because I thought about this too when we had closed our classroom, is like someone may come back that they're negative, so you think, okay, they can go back to school. But if a peer in that class comes back positive, now that child with the negative test is a close contact of that other kid and now has to leave.
I'm sorry, how do they become close contacts of other kids when they haven't seen the other kids?
Well, because it goes back a certain amount of days. And so,
right.
So, I mean, I think it's all a case by case basis. Like when that child first became symptomatic that originally went home.
So I guess I'm not digging into the weird situations that could occur. I'm just curious for clarification. Next time, if there's a COVID case, will students have to stay out for an extended period of time, even if they have negative test results and have followed that policy appropriately, as long as there's no other circumstances? Is that what I'm hearing, that maybe the guidance changed and that would happen in the future, or you just don't know?
Well, so Melissa, the quarantining rules are you have to wait 5 days from the close contact before you can have that test. So in a perfect world, every single kid is running out to get that test on day 5. And then they're all getting their results back, in 24 hours, and then they can come back to school. But, we might have parent A who goes out and gets their student tested sooner or right at that day, and another parent who delays a little bit to have that parent tested. But I think we, again, have been operating under that assumption and guidance that you quarantine the whole classroom for a certain period of days, not bringing the kids back intermittently because one parent is more proactive than another. And so I think that's a piece that we need to go back and look at, that protocol of how to return kids, because at the same time, if the teacher had to quarantine as well, now we have to figure out staffing issues because that teacher is teaching remotely at that time. So you're asking a very reasonable question. I don't think we can answer you why we haven't gone that far, other than the guidance hasn't really pushed us that way.
Okay, well, I think that I would like to encourage you guys to look at it, because if our children have waited the 5 days, have had negative test results, and there's no school for them to return to, it's not their fault if there's a staffing issue. They deserve education. So
I agree. That's what I'm saying. It's a reasonable.
yeah, I'm good though. I just wanted you guys to hear that. Thank you.
All right. I know Jessica has a couple questions, and then I have one. So, excuse me, not Jessica. So, Cheryl, obviously, I've spent too much time last night doing this.
Well, I appreciate all of this discussion and the information from everybody. I think the last thing, I actually, it's not a question, it's to reinforce, Andy, what you've already said. And let's get as much of this in writing as we can for people. For example, the sibling question, to have that guidance on the website, both the schools and the SU, would be very helpful for people. Everybody is doing the best they know how to do. I don't question that at all. We're just facing some very new and very real challenges. So let's get as much information as we can. I actually think our information dissemination is improving, and I want to thank everybody for that, and just say we can do even more. So that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just a couple points. One is that, I think we have to acknowledge that we got cocky. Keith Loud before school began, did his sort of state of COVID at Dartmouth Hitchcock, and he actually gave this district one of the few attaboys for having no cases. And I think we all kind of thought that was our future, and got surprised. And we may be able to find that there are policies and processes suggested by some of our neighboring districts that weren't so lucky. But I think what we just found out is that that it wasn't magic on our path. We just dodged a bullet, and now that that's no longer the case, there may be some stuff we can do to pick up some tips from the folks next door. Charlie, you get your hand up.
I was just wondering what the source of the material that's going to go to parents. Will it be from the union, the unified district, or will it be from the principals? And if so, will they use the same language, or will it be?
Likely will work together, I could imagine.
It'd be good if they were the same, if the policies are the same and the language is the same.
And one of the things I'm really working on, working with all the principals, is we have boilerplates. That's just an SU boilerplate.
Yeah.
And then they can tweak it to put it on their letterhead or whatever they need to do, but it's exactly what you're saying. So we are sending consistent information. It doesn't matter what school it's coming from, it's consistent.
So particularly with the sibling issue, I'm sure that's going to be vexatious at some time.
So we just take a quick check to see if anybody else has further questions on this. I did hear, and we'll give you all sort of heads up, that I did note that Andy said that we are not ready with the memorandum of understanding tonight, and I don't know if we're ready to do the policy thing that the SU did or not, but it sounds like there's going to be a 5-minute meeting in our future sometime in the next several days, and I'll check in with everybody so we can get that done. It's just they need the paperwork. All boards have to have the same MOU.
This is between the teachers union and
yes, and also it would be highly useful if it's the same policy, because it would make people crazy if it's not.
Jack, you can state what the policy is in principle for the public.
Why don't you do it?
Right. It's just that the supervisory union, I think there's unanimity around a policy whereby all staff will be vaccinated if they are not, for whatever reason, exception or the religious
the religious thing
aspect of it, then they would be tested weekly. That's the essence of what we're talking about here.
Or at least at a minimum of weekly.
And there was a date attached to that, I believe.
Which
was
it the 2nd or the 8th?
We were looking at the 8th, October 8th, as that
drop dead do it.
They either have to produce proof of vaccination or have had the first shot by, assuming they're getting a double dose, but at least they've had the first shot by October 8th.
And if they choose not to have vaccination for whatever reason, we don't care what the reason is, they sign the declaration and then they agree to have the testing.
Yes.
And in the very unlikely event someone refuses to do that, it's up then.
Then that becomes an insubordination
procedure, as we say.
Procedure, yes.
Thank you.
All right, and you know, I anticipate we'll be visiting this, unfortunately, over and over and over again because of the reality of the situation. I do think it's important to note, just for public record, that the state did change their guidance sort of midstream, because I saw the two rather contradictory memos on that, so that did happen. Now to my question, and that is notification. I got calls from both of you, which I appreciate, and I got robocalls from both districts. I only got one. I think there was an update. Was it Grafton? And I didn't get that one. And I do want to make sure that both boards get it, and key notice people get it. Particularly, I want to make sure that the town administrators that's the town clerk in Athens, and town administrator in Grafton. Though maybe the town clerk wants it as well, Kim. I don't know, probably. And the same for other folks in Westminster. This is a public health thing, and it's like if there was any other public health outbreak, imagine this is the 19th century and it's dysentery. You would want all your health officials and all your responsible people to be aware of it. So we can make sure that they're included in the call out.
Yeah, what I would ask is we are updating numbers in Power School. Nicole and I did have a conversation to make sure that we had the best number for board members, so that we could make sure that email and phone number is in there. So if you can either email myself or Nicole that information, and then we will get that uploaded into that robocall.
Okay. Just because it was amazing how fast people came up to me going to pick up the mail. Literally 20 minutes after I talked to you guys, I got hit with questions 3 times on the way in to pick up the package. So it doesn't take long for the Facebook commandos to get into action, and we want to make sure that the folks who are actually tasked with responding are in the loop. All right. Are we done? Is there anything else? And can we move on to principals who probably have the thunder stolen by Thursday?
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to mention as we go into talking about bringing students back staggered times, and I think we need to be mindful of what that would look like to the classroom and for the teacher's responsibility for teaching in person and remote at the same time, because our remote schedules are generally much different than our in-person schedule. So that's just something, if we have those discussions, to be mindful of. As you know, we have 3 classes. One of our 5th grade classes was remote until yesterday, and our kindergarten will be remote until October 4th.
At Grafton Elementary, we've had 3 confirmed cases, as Andy already reported, and our school was remote from Thursday, September 15th until Tuesday, September 21st. Our COVID protocols in both schools is that students and staff wear masks indoors at all times, snacks and lunch are outside, as well as learning opportunities as much as possible. We follow a flow chart that's provided by the Vermont Department of Health when deciding whether or not it's safe for students or staff to return to school. We did start our surveillance testing at both of our schools today. Westminster, we had 80 students and staff sign up today. And we had 25 at Grafton. Start of school. Westminster has been really positive within the building. We currently have 160 students, 1 VTVLC student, and 4 students who are homeschooling for this year. While we are following the all of the elementary schools are engaging in a responsive classroom training throughout this year, professional development. So we are following the responsive classroom acronym CARES, which is cooperation, assertion, responsibility, empathy, and self-control throughout the building. We're working on creating classroom rules and school rules. And at Grafton, we're off to a great start as well. We have 46 students, 43 of them are in person, 3 students are with VTVLC, and we also have 6 students who are homeschooling. Our focus this year at Grafton is on kindness. Students are encouraged to practice kindness each day And teachers and staff are encouraging and promoting kindness throughout morning meetings and reinforcing kind acts with our Panther Paws.
School gardens, a great thing. This fall, our school garden was wonderful. Students worked with our librarian and garden educator, Mandy Walsh, to harvest cucumbers, tomatoes, potatoes, and of course, eggs from our chickens. Students go out regularly and learn about the garden, how and what grows there, how it's incorporated into our school meals. And next week we'll begin our harvest of the month. Mandy also shows students, she chooses one, I think it's peppers this month, and we do a taste test. They learn about it, they read about it, it's wonderful.
At Grafton, our garden has grown wonderfully, and so has our pumpkin patch that we planted last spring. Students have spent some time with Mandy Walsh, who's also our librarian and garden educator. We have kale, tomatoes, these pumpkins, there's also some corn, and we plan to incorporate our pumpkins into a fall event. Details about that are coming, we just don't know with COVID. After school program, so both schools have an after school program that runs from 3:15 to 5 daily. Students are served a small meal at 3:15, and then they engage in a variety of clubs, enrichment activities, arts and crafts, group games. Same for you, right? And so building upgrades. This year, we are repairing a section of our roof that's currently leaking right by the gym entrance. There's one portion of the roof. We are repairing a heating coil in our dining room, repairing a circular pump, and due to a lightning strike in early August, we've replaced the fire alarm panel, part of our phone system, dishwasher control board, and the heating control router. It's quite a strike. At Grafton, they had a busy summer. Our custodians did a great job. There was a 3-way valve on the fan coil that was replaced. Service the ultraviolet water treatment system with filters and bulbs, which is done annually. 3 classrooms were painted, the main office, the nurse's office, the front entryway, and the kitchen. The map of the United States was repainted by a Grafton High School student and her mom for community service hours. Our sheds were painted by a Saxons River student for community service hours, and his mom is a teacher here, or a paraprofessional here at our school, and she helped with that too. And our PTG donated a beautiful sandbox that was installed by one of our families, and we've received lots of donations from the community for toys for use in that sandbox. That's beautiful and huge.
So our classes are all obviously up and running. One thing that we did have to change with our 6th grade, there's 2 6th grade classes, and the groupings that we created in June with the move outs and the move ins, the class combinations that we created in June didn't reflect the groupings that we saw in September. So the 6th grade teachers and I made the decision to redistribute the students within the 2 classes, just ensuring that both all students have both academic and social peers within their classes.
And at Grafton, we've considered for several years to have a combination kindergarten and 1st grade class. And this week, Karina Stack, our kindergarten teacher, and Lisa Buswell, our 1st and 2nd grade teacher, collaborated and made this happen. So we are going to offer kindergarten and 1st grade class to students who might just need that extra support for that transition year. And if they do stay in that first, so there are 1st graders in 2 classes, they will continue on to 2nd grade. But the format for instruction will be very similar to all of our other classrooms. And I think it's an exciting opportunity for our kids to have that.
And with assessments, map testing will begin the week of September 27th for Westminster. Are you guys next week too?
Yes,
right.
Yep, we start Tuesday.
This is a computer-based assessment for grades K through 6, and which measures growth in both reading and math. Students across the SU will take the map fall, winter, and spring, and the data just helps us with our school-based interventions. And then we are also doing benchmark assessments within each building. This is a reading assessment that helps teachers create and instruct guided reading groups within their classrooms. Any questions?
Let's see, a couple, but I want to have other people ask first. Starting from my left, Ginger.
No, I think I'm all set.
Cheryl.
The question about maps testing for kindergarten, since they will be out until October 4th, how do you reschedule?
We'll just do that, yeah, we'll reschedule for that.
Okay, thank you very much.
And connected to that, how how long do they, for any particular student, how much time are they devoting to the maps testing?
roughly 30 minutes.
Charlie?
Just do you remember what MAP stands for?
Measurement of,
Go ahead.
Measurement of academic progress. MAP, yep,
Is that
measurement of
the
academic
system you've always
progress.
been using, or is it new?
I think we started last year. I've used it. Have we been using it for
We're
4?
in the third or fourth year.
Oh, okay.
The other acronym you'll hear is NWEA. It's the Northwest Educational Assessment. They're out of Portland, Oregon.
Thank you.
And House rule is, first time you use an acronym, you have to explain what it is. And it will be enforced with violence if necessary. Melissa, you got any questions? How about you, Lynn?
None.
Jessa?
None.
How about you, Elise? Elise may have stepped away. There we are.
I'm good, thank you.
All right, I have one, and that is, Andy made a point that a lot of educational professionals have made in the last couple of months, was that, kids who know how to socialize, kids who know how to use computer equipment can navigate through these remote instruction periods. K1, to some extent, second, have had an exceptionally rough time of that. And I'm wondering if we need, or you anticipate us needing resources or additional programming support to help the kids that were perhaps educational casualties last year.
I would imagine, yes. If you think about our students in K1 and 2 haven't really had a year without a COVID interruption. So I think that it is likely that we will need support, both academic and behavioral support.
I'm mentioning it simply because, again, I'm looking forward to how that gets translated. A lot of that I understand is probably coming out of like ESSER money and whatever, but we would probably, because we will be asked, just like to be kept in the loop and to provide whatever support, whatever, tell us what we can do as a board, as a community to support that and see what we can do. Yes.
I just want to emphasize that I think we all agree in that in principle. The issue is coming down to, we can put the strategies in place and put the funding in place. We don't have the actual people applying for jobs to then come in and do some of the support and interventions that we need. So it's not only a local issue, it is a national issue of a shortage of teachers, of interventionists, of paraprofessionals, and other staff to help support students. So I think we can write those strategies, but that's going to be the big lift, is to try and.
One of the things that we can do as board members is put things in local media, network with people, and just raise awareness, because I think that too often people think that there's nothing they can do, particularly on the paraprofessional side, on the support side, and even people that maybe have left the system a couple of years ago that don't realize that there's a need and maybe might take a second look at coming in to be helpful. And that's something we can do. I mean, I've been approached by retired teachers saying, gee, it's too bad, I can't be helpful. And I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe actually it could be. And I just don't know what you need. A whole lot of people don't look at School Spring or these other sort of in-house reference systems. We need to at least raise alert levels. Even if you might get a lot of stuff that you don't need, at least you'll have something coming in the door.
No, and that's why I was saying it, because we want to get that out there, that's what we need. Is we need people who are willing to work in schools and want to work with kids, and we got to figure out how to structure that around so that it's beneficial for everybody.
So tell your friends' friends that if they have taught in the system, would like to have some interest in doing paraprofessional work, it's time to put that idea into action because your communities could use you.
And I'll say that we always welcome, board members who want to volunteer. We could also get something with the
Won't be
state.
the first time.
Sorry.
All righty. Very good.
We'll leave that.
Yeah, go ahead.
And because we're going to be writing a budget or requesting or suggesting money from the ESSA, will there be a moment at some point in the future where you'll have a sense of how big this problem really is? It's probably not just K1, it's probably up through the grades. There are some kids who did fine and some kids who fell through the cracks. So I'm wondering, how will we know the size of the problem? Any ideas?
I'm not really sure. We're always looking at data. So what every round of maps, we're always looking at data. And the thing that's helpful with that assessment is it goes back before COVID. So it shows a student's growth for years and their trajectory, and it has them going up a trajectory. And what we saw when we shut down in 2020 and then came back in September is kids were making gains. And then when we reassessed them and they came back in September, it was like almost everyone was this. And so it's just regaining, and some kids have been able to do that. And, every learner is different, so it's hard to say with broad strokes, but I'm not really sure.
But we're going to have that initial data back sometime in October-ish, mid-October to late when the data comes back and you can look at it and you can kind of sort it out. Student Services is also doing DIBELS testing. Don't ask me what DIBELS stands for, Jack. I do not know. Dialectic something.
All right, good enough.
It's a very quick literacy assessment for students. It gives us a little bit of a snapshot of where a kid might be, but it's another tool for us to kind of understand where that student is. And so we're doing that K through 4 for all students, and that way we can grab that data and then we'll test kids throughout the year, but that is a piece of data. Student Services is also, they've always done, but they're universal screeners at the kindergarten level with phonemic awareness through our speech folks. We're also doing occupational therapy screeners, universal screeners at kindergarten. So we have that data. In the past, we haven't always used that data. So we'll have the MAPS data. We have the Fontes and Pinnell data that's coming in. We have the LLI data that's going to be coming in very shortly.
We will have a thesaurus.
Yes, so all this data will come in, and then we'll be able to sort through it. So it's going to be like October, and that's typically, when in special education you would see an uptick of kids starting to get referred is right before the holidays, and then you see that again after your second dip of assessment. So it's going to follow that typical same pattern of where it is, but there's a need now. I mean, Liz and I had a conversation yesterday or the day before about some immediate needs that she has, and we need to kind of try and slide that need in now, even before we get that data.
I'll go one more. Yeah.
Just a question in the recovery planning process structure that we have. Liz and I had one conversation. I'd love to have you speak to. We were talking about a need that the principals and others have for the data in a more uniform way, in a regular way. What would help you to kind of answer the question Charlie was asking in part? How do you track it? Are there ways that the system can help you more?
I think that if we had a consistent way to track and a consistent form, we're putting all the data into one spreadsheet. And so we had something for a bit last year. It was pretty cumbersome. And just making sure, like Andy referred to, we've always had the data, but we haven't always talked about it at an elementary level as a team level. And just having those opportunities to do that would be helpful. And that's really a scheduling thing, allowing our teams of teachers to look at data together is just a scheduling piece, I believe. I don't know, what would you?
I feel like the data tracker that we use is different every year, because there's great things about one and there's not great things about it, and then you keep trying to tweak it.
And the data pieces we have differ slightly, like this year we're using Dibble, so how is that going to go in? So it's just making sure that we are keeping track of all our data points that we're using and having a universal spreadsheet or system to look at everything clearly. I don't know what the
Ricky and
best
I
way to
began
do
a
that
conversation last year about a data, like a clearinghouse that we can get all the data into, and then be able to sort and look at that data. There's some real powerful attachments to Power School, which is our student management system, that we can look and do. There's always costs associated with those things, but they're really powerful at being able to take all that data, be able to put all that data in there, and then be able to, a teacher can sort it how they need to do it. So I want to see all the kids real quick who don't know their addition, right? Bang, you can get that. I want to see all the kids who don't know their middle vowel sounds. We can, and so you can, that's the kind of information I think teachers need quickly, as opposed to, all right, let's do our old data wall and put all our information up and all our, oh, here's our all yellow kids, let's put them over here. That's how you used to do it. And so these engines will allow us to, manipulate the data, and then we can also bring in attendance data, and we can bring in some other data. So we had started the conversation last year, towards the end of last year, and it kind of slipped off the radar at some other places.
Thank you.
Oh, just as a caution, I've been in advised a lot of institutions over the years, and one thing that often happens is people develop, a new system, followed by the following year by a new system. But what you're really looking for is 5-year trends, and you've got 4 different systems. So I would just, I had this conversation almost word for word that you just expressed with Chris Kibbe 7 years ago. And the reason I mention it is because, we, even back then, literally had a succession of, brand new system literally every year. And really had nothing that was useful in the way of trend data or comparison, or, how are we doing? Are we making any progress in our instruction, in our learning? None of that was available because it was, you just had this, dumpster fire full of different systems. Yeah, you were there, in fact, in that conversation. So that's the only caution I would have. Unless there is other questions from anyone, I'm going to go on to finance, and it's your turn, Laura.
So we begin meeting with principals second week of September, the week of the 13th, regarding budgets. We're trying to finalize the budget for the SU so we could do assessment for the principals, and that way we could do the final meetings. We're hoping that we can finalize that by next week. We are having auditors in-house the week of the 7th of October till October 14th. And after the auditors come in, we're hoping they'll be able to finalize their audits by the first week of November. So then we could start meeting in the first week of November with all the boards for budget presentation.
So give me that date again.
So from October 7th to the 14th,
Yeah.
auditors are scheduled to come in. And they'll have at least 2 to 3 weeks to finalize audits. That's what we have discussed with them. And we are hoping to then, once they finalize audits, present our budgets to all of the boards.
Is budget presentation a dependency of the auditor, or is it just simply that the auditor is taking so much of your time you don't have bandwidth?
Well, sometimes you guys need surplus information, so it is good to have our audits so you guys could match surplus information with what we have with audits as well.
Yeah.
Some of the boards, last year we had the issue that they had the budget approval on hold because they wanted to have a better understanding of their surplus.
Yeah, we're going to be doing some education about that this year.
But if you guys want to have a pre-budget meeting, we could still have pre-budget meeting, maybe the second, third week of October.
I would very much like us to do that because, the amount of money we have to teach first grade is not a dependency of whether or not I've got $2,000 more in my surplus. And this is something that you'll hear hopefully more tactfully expressed when we meet at the SU level and elsewhere. So, all right, very good. Are there any questions for Flora on the process? Melissa, anything? Gwen? Elise? How do we do this in reverse order?
No, thank you. I'm good.
All right. Jessa?
Nope.
All right, I see. We anticipate, is that a preliminary hand raised? No? Okay. So I guess not. Gosh, you got up like, Lucy. Let me make sure you're down. Again, just to remind everyone that 6B is budget planning process, and we're going to talk a little bit both about the process and, you're going to correct me when I go off script for this, which I might quite a bit. But I want people to sort of understand some outlines that I think we need and hear from you in terms of just your general sense of what's important. Lynn, this is going to be an item for you because you were the one that did the walk around at the Grafton Elementary School. So I'm going to put you a bit on the spot about your impressions because that's part of this discussion. All right. With that surprise, let's move on to 6A, which is the always controversial a Westminster van. Who's got that?
So it came, so it came up when I had my budget meeting with Flora because there is not a large budget line for the van and it needs upkeep. It needed new brakes this year. It needs, it just needs general upkeep of the vehicle. It was purchased for Westminster when food was prepared at the center school and then delivered to the West School. So that's why we've traditionally had a van. And then I think it had a use when there were multiple students at the school who had staggered days where they were dismissed at different times and the busing wasn't always reliable to take them home at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock rather than the 3 o'clock dismissal. So when I spoke to Andy and Flora about it last week or the week before, I was wondering if it would be better suited for the restorative practices piece because we have a homeschool liaison who's in our building every Tuesday, and part of her job is to meet with families, help them connect with services, providing transportation at times, and I just was floating that possibility out there, but I wasn't sure how it happens and if it should, or just was a wonder for me.
Go ahead.
Well, at this point, is how much is it used? So is there really a reason for that?
Andy?
I know that beyond restorative practices, I know that IT uses the van to move materials around and whatnot. There definitely could be usage to have a vehicle at the SU level for various, not just for restorative practices, but something that could be under the transportation umbrella, and then someone could check it out to, or sign it out so they can use it for various things.
The reason I say it's controversial is because it's been sort of an orphan item for a bit. And we did make a commitment 2 years ago now to consolidate all transportation at the SU level, and it seems to be being used predominantly for SU-related activities. I don't have a particular thought about van, not van. It seems a lot cheaper than a bus, but it does seem like it belongs. It's something that perhaps we need to get to the supervisory union and decide if they want a van and want this van, and have that go from our line item to that one, if that's something we could do.
Yeah, I don't know the whole legalities about the gifting or how it gets transferred.
Here you go.
Yeah, so here's the keys, right?
Yeah.
But I think it would continue to be used to support students throughout the SU.
Right, and I just think that it sounds like that sort of thing. The only thing I ever heard about the ban beyond that was there was some discussion about meeting, and just I see your hand, I will get to it in a second, is the business about the programming West-West, whether they needed something specifically for that or not.
No, they take a school bus.
All right.
And back.
Jesse, your floor is yours.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking that the van, the SU provides transportation and the SU provides special ed. So if the van is not being used by the SU, I don't know if we're getting the reimbursement for special ed transportation that we might be eligible for if we were keeping track of when the van was used for what.
Basically being used to haul stuff.
Jess, are you meaning in the past or moving forward?
I mean, well, basically in the past, but I think it would be helpful moving forward that if it was being used for other purposes, we would have the billing to cover for it and possibly get reimbursement for some of that.
I would agree, however, the reimbursement portion of special education is going away. That's the Act 173 piece. So we're going to be moving to a
Yeah.
Sorry. It was a great.
Maybe we can backfill.
I touched the third rail there for a second. So
we'll have plenty of fun conversations about that, but not.
But I think the last thing, just so that everyone's clear, like if we were to move it over, to transportation, and if it were needed to transport kids to West-West,
yeah,
how I would intend, it would be something that this would say, we need the van and sign it out, and that kind of stuff.
Just like a school bus.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, to the best of my knowledge, it's been used to haul hamburgers and computer equipment for the last year or so. So it's not a lot of special ed reimbursement for those, regrettably. Although maybe it's an ESSER thing.
It has been used in the past when there was kids in the building, because paras can drive it. There's no CDL requirement, and it has been used for some of the special ed kids that were going to out of district placements and then just return home, certain kids at the end of the day. It's actually really useful for us to have some small vehicles in our fleet for that kind of stuff, or even just multiple teachers going to the same meeting or something to that effect. So we definitely have places for minivans in our SU fleet, and the ability to sign it out. I think it's a really good idea.
Like I said, the van never fails to eat at 15 minutes.
Yeah, I agree 100% with you, Jessa, about having a fleet of vehicles that are on the ready. My understanding, and I would want to defer and get the information back, I don't know if the ESSER funds could be used to purchase a used vehicle.
It was semi-facetious, and it was really worth just watching you groan. But I do appreciate the point. All right. So is there an action item on this? Do we need to offer it to the SU tonight, or what are we doing?
I'm going to make a little point, and then I'm going to make a motion.
Sure, for that.
And my point is that at the State Board of Education approving financial arrangements, I don't know whether anyone was thinking about vans, but essentially it put assets, Westminster School assets, being or was to be transferred back to Westminster. So I just think it's probably the better part of wisdom to have a vote on this matter being taken with the Westminster Board and the unified school district board.
Yeah.
I don't think it matters too much, but I think it just to be the better part of wisdom. And so I'd like to make a motion that we transfer the van ownership to the supervisory union for it to trade in to get a new vehicle with ESSER funds or to do whatever it cares to do. So that's my question.
Would you mind a friendly amendment to offer it to them? Because they
To
might
offer
tell
it
us,
to them.
they might tell
To
us to
offer
send
it.
it to the nearest landfill.
Yeah.
All right, so with that motion, go ahead.
Is there any accounting problem with handing a van that has a value from one entity to the other?
Not generally. You know, we didn't have this as part of our master financial supplement. I didn't care. And B, it didn't seem like it was that, but I would be in support of making the offer. The SU would have to accept the offer, which I'm sure Jessica can persuade them to do, but I think our first step is to make the offer and see what happens, and see if it's going to cause, and also give Andy a chance to see if that's going to make his life miserable in some small way that we haven't done already.
We want to go kick the tires and look underneath.
Yeah, look underneath that rust could be a thing.
No, yeah, obviously, because there would be a cost incurred that we weren't budgeting for. We need to look at that.
Well, we're going to charge you $100,000.
Plus, there's a write-off for presumably Westminster paid for this thing, so there's a write-off in Westminster.
They don't get tax write-offs.
I think it'll come out in the wash. It'll come out in the wash. You know, the Flora and whoever will.
Make it go away.
So we are now 2 minutes before I hit my 15 minutes on this subject. I'm going to call the question, and individual boards will roll call just because I think it affects its potential asset for you guys for next year. So why don't you start?
Okay, Charlie, your vote?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Okay. Aye.
All right. And for the unified board, Jessa, how do you vote on this idea?
I actually would abstain on the unified board because we're allowing Westminster to make their own budgetary decisions, and this would be part of the next budget.
Interesting point. I think we have to have at least one vote in favor, even so, just
yes.
Fill under ours. Thank you. Sorry. Lynn?
Yes.
Melissa?
Yes.
Elise? And Ginger disappeared, and she's physically present. How'd she do that? Oh, here we are. Ginger, how do you vote on this weighty subject?
About the van?
Yeah, we're going to give. We're
Offering it.
We're trying to gift it to. Yeah, offering it to
I say yes.
All right, and I'll make it unanimous. Just if you want to abstain, that's fine. Just let me know.
Elise hasn't.
Oh, Elise, I'm sorry. Elise. Elise is just so.
Yes, I vote yes.
All righty.
You heard me before. Okay.
Consider that done, by gosh. All right, now, it's 7:15, and that means I gotta keep this short. And I wasn't planning on it. Budget planning process. All right. It is a truism that policy is supposed to drive budgets, and it's a reality that budgets drive policy if you're not careful. And one of the things that I want us to get into is a more orderly and professional budget process. If we at least do it once, it would be nice. And what does that mean? It means, one, we have unified books. And he's heard me, about this a couple hundred times, so I bet he gets it, and you do too. Because this really means that we present a budget to the voters that says, this is the money we are asking you as your portion of the pie, but it's not the whole pie. The money comes from Title I, comes from state grants, comes from this new ESSER thing, comes from a variety of sources. And people need to have a whole picture. What is it we're spending the money on holistically? With that said, the other part of this is not only do we need to know what the broader budgetary picture looks like, but we need to declare out what is important to us. Because if you don't declare that something is important to you, then nothing is important to you. Nothing has everything has the same level of value, and you basically said, I give up, it's up to the administration, and I'll yell at them later. And that's not fair. Our job is to be the steward of not just our local taxpayers' money, but the entire pile. And we need to say, what is important to us? Is it more important to us that we have separate kindergarten? Is it more important that the side of the building doesn't fall down? Those are actual choices we get to make. What is it that we see as the biggest priorities? And this is really that time for you as board members and staff and administrators to say, you need to understand this thing has to be addressed because it is the one big initiative that we need to get done this year. Or there is this one area that is so redundant that it's actually impeding educational progress to have it just hanging around as a fossil. So I just want people to sort of just talk in very general terms about what it is that they're worried about and what it is that they care about in terms of the upcoming year. So we never do this, and we should do this every single year. And I know it's putting everybody a bit on the spot, but many of you have talked to me about things that you're concerned about. I think it's time to just lay them out and don't worry about rambling or anything. Just kind of get them out. You guys are going to have a whole new school system. Let me start with that. What is it that you're worried about?
Good question. I think it's more what we're excited about.
Well, then what is it that you think, what are the things that where do you feel you want to step out from where you are now that you're not seeing get done or that you're worried about? Like for example, you've got an air handling problem. You've got some changes in your staffing. What are you concerned about?
Yeah. Well, I'll just throw, without having any preparation.
I'm really sorry
I'll
to
throw
this
out
cruel,
that I want to see us be able to talk about and concentrate on things that are over and above COVID and are actually to do with the education and our community engagement with the schools. And I see a lot of resources out there right now, an exceptional amount of resources to be able to develop our educational resources and our community engagement and our ability to have programs that get out in the community and get out in the environment to a really great degree. And I would like us to be able to have time and resources to focus on those things. What exactly they mean, that's a whole big long discussion or over multiple meetings. But that's sort of what I'm excited about.
Probably go for it.
But all that, plus, I'm a science educator, and my passion is about experiential, hands-on learning, getting outside, getting your hands on things, project-based learning. I don't come with any knowledge or critique or anything about what's going on right now, but I'd love to be part of whatever process there is to encourage that, to integrate that. But I know from experience just how hard it is for teachers to make the switch, to dare to deal with the chaos and the uncertainties around project-based experiential learning. So they need a lot of help, and it's really important to handhold, to demonstrate, to get them the materials they need. And this is probably the best time of all with this money that we've got of learning loss remediation to define this hands-on experiential project-based learning as that, as part of that, and get some resources in, whether it's training or materials or curriculum or whatever. So that's the thing that I would know about, want to talk about, or doing, elementary studies, particularly elementary studies.
We're focused on West, let's do all the West folks.
Well, thank you. I really agree with both what Charlie and David said. I'm struck by this opportunity now. Yes, the infusion of a huge amount of money that we will not see again. Can we really figure out how that can be used, these one-time resources, to help enhance what our larger goals have been for a long time? So we need to look at that. And in the process, yeah, I'd like to see a process that really engages the principals and the faculty, all of the staff and the community in this. I want to hear from you guys who've been dealing with this really in isolation in a lot of ways for 18 months, almost 2 years. So I want our budget planning process to be rich with conversation, shared insights that will get to the kinds of goals that David has proposed.
I'm gonna start with our probably unwilling volunteers from Grafton, because I know, I talked about this in very vague terms, but now I'm sort of not throwing this, fastball right at people. Ginger, what's your thoughts? What do we, you're new in this, but you've got fresh eyes.
So when you're asking that question, my thoughts about what with the budget?
Well, what are the things that we are either not doing that we should be, or doing that you don't understand why we're doing them? What are the things what's important to you that you're not seeing happen here?
I'd like to see more interface with the actual schools. I see us in a lot of meetings, talking about a lot of things, making decisions, discussions, and I don't see us actually in the schools with families and kids and teachers, and I just would like to see more interface there. To be more involved with what's actually going on in the schools.
One of the really horrendous aspects of COVID is last year I went to a school building once with a mask on, and it was over at Westminster. They were so shocked they almost didn't believe I was there, and that's not been the history here,
Well, that's all I've seen.
Yeah, well,
and I have to say, I met with Angela the other day and had a full tour of the building, and I really enjoyed meeting with teachers and talking about the things that we've been talking about in the meeting. It's like, oh, this is the playground. This is what it looks like, and the busing situation, and just really meant so much to me to be in here, and I know I hadn't been able to. So I'd love to see more of that if we can do it.
So we will talk more about that. And I do, when we get back to this in our next meeting, it's going to get serious in our next meeting, is we start to talk about how this translates to dollars and people and to programs and what it is they need. Jessa, I've thrown this ball at everybody else, so it's your turn.
I don't think I have a lot to meaningfully add. I think Ginger's right, though, that when we, especially now with the ESSER funds, and I know we have the recovery committee and then the recovery ESSER spending committee. But Ginger's right, though. We sometimes make decisions, and even decisions we make with the principals might not be right for the people they actually affect down the line. The first thing that comes to mind is some of the, we had talked about like an outdoor structure, and we had never actually consulted any of the people that we expected to use it. Right. So she's totally right about that. And I'm hoping we're planning on making budgeting more transparent anyways for everybody, taxpayers, board members, etc. But I do hope that we sort of go with the more about like what the recovery committee says and actually have input from parents and paras and even the building maintenance and custodian, because we basically decide what they're going to do regardless of whether or not it's what they want. So there is that. Ginger raises an excellent point that I hadn't really considered before, and I think that's very important. The only other thing, when it comes to budgeting this year for next year, is we have a shortage of paras. We have a shortage of substitute teachers. We actually have a shortage of full-time licensed teachers to get applications for openings. And especially on the front of the paras, our pay scale is going to have to be looked at. Some of our paras are making like $14 an hour. And
15 and change now, I fixed that.
okay, 15 and change, which is also what Burger King is paying.
I take that point, absolutely.
So there's that, and that's going to be a difficult conversation with the taxpayers, but it's going to have to happen.
Put you in charge of talking to Deb and to facilitate about that. Thank you. Thank you. Lynn? We've had practice watching him swing at the ball. What you got?
I feel like I need more input, like Ginger was saying, from the teachers, the principals, the maintenance people. You know, how can we budget if we don't know what they need? I've had one input when I was able to talk with Angela. I specifically asked, you know, what kind of stuff do we need maintenance wise? Because that's a committee I'm supposed to be on and hasn't gotten started yet. COVID sort of disrupted everything. And she said, well, the building by the front door needs to be repainted again. You know, so we need to be kept up on what kind of needs there are at all different levels. And I'm not quite sure how best to have that reported in. You know, if they could make wish lists, or you know, we can sit and talk to individuals.
They're going to get their shot at the end of this conversation. Fair warning. I appreciate that, Gwen. Thank you. And if you have other thoughts on this, chip in a minute or two. Melissa.
I think a lot of great things have been said. I like building community. I like nature stuff. I definitely want to pay our paras a lot more money than we pay them. I agree with the being more interconnected with the teachers and what they want to bring, and feeling like a more team would be really valuable. And if I was to think about next year and a worry that I might have, it would be that I think some of our students, I'm saying this because I learned something that recently, and I think with COVID, a lot of our kids and our families have lost buy-in to the importance of education, and the role of the school and the trust between families and school and all those relationships. I heard a few kids that I'm connected to that just entered high school, maybe talking about wanting to drop out, and that dropped my, you know, that's terrible to me, you know, like, so I think that the effects of COVID, we really need to reach out to our communities, to our families, to engage people, to rebuild trust, to have everybody at the team, and to know that some of our families are done with the school. They're done, and we have to rebuild those relationships.
Thank you. Who on the screen have I missed? Elise, thank you. Elise, what's your thoughts?
Hi. Well, yeah, I very happy to hear everyone else's ideas, and so I guess I agree with, you know, after COVID and during the end of COVID, we've got a lot of catching up to do. Looking ahead, I feel that this is also, COVID has also kind of made it clear that what we've been doing with outdoor education and outdoor gardens and that sort of thing, and emphasizing that is really helpful, especially in the last year and a half. So I would stress continuing that, like looking at what we have for outdoor for the kids and, improve on it if possible. And then another subject, and this is, Westminster down the line, start talking about, the West Building and the physical structure and the physical grounds, but then the future, programs out there. I know that's a little ways out, but those are things I'd like to, we're going to have to incorporate into the budget, the grounds and upkeep, but also thinking ahead to programs in the future.
Got it. Anything else?
That's it.
All right. Let me just, I'm not going to ramble, which is hard for me. I'm terrified for our first and second graders. They missed a year, and this is the beginning of their life experience with education. We have a program at the high school called Freshman Academy, which at least is intended to bring kids that have gaps up to a standard that they need to succeed the rest of their high school career. I don't think it's a bad conceptual model for elementary schools. So that's item one for me. Item two is we have physical plants that weren't designed for the world that we seem to be in and are likely to be in for a while. They don't do air handling well. They're still have that factory model of enclosed space where that's supposed to be how you do education without distraction. And I have Lynn, and I have Cheryl, and we have me, and the rest of you all feel that that's, we moved here because we wanted more of an experiential rural focus, and we need to use those assets. A year or two ago, we literally had, I don't know which one of you guys was involved with that. There's still little camp areas all along the Saxon River coming down here. They're all built by elementary school, where the kids built their own classrooms effectively out of sticks and stuff. And I thought it's kind of cool. And we need to figure out ways to free us from the classroom and fix these buildings so that they're safe, because they're not safe. This building, and frankly, the Westminster building, I can see the sag in the Westminster roof. I don't know if you guys can, but I can see it. It makes me crazy. And there's a wall over here, just on the other side of the entryway, that's just wood, and that's got a bulge in it, and paint pops off it every year because it wasn't built properly, and it's got rot in it, and you can see it. We got to fix these things. And we need to do that now. We need to do air handling, because that's not going to do it. That's why we have the windows open. And as a person with oxygen issues, I can tell you it's a problem, because I feel it every time I come in here. So those, that's maybe a little bit more concrete, but those are things that I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about the fact that we have a school model here in Grafton that was built on the assumption of 70+ kids, and we're a long time from seeing that. And while we may, in the course of time, that may shift and that may happen, it's not going to happen now. And do we have a plan and staffing and educational program that meets a school of 40 kids? If that's what our future is. So we need to think about that. So those are some of the things that cross my mind. I got to think about this more than everybody else, because I dumped this all on you tonight, but I've been chewing on this for weeks. And these all have budgetary implications. They have sort of broad, where are we 10 years from now implications. And they're important to have discussion about, because again, we have this once in a generational opportunity to execute some of these items. And we need to, A, make sure that the things we do if they're going to commit us for multiple years in the future, acknowledge that right up front. See, this is something we just think is now part of education for the rest of the, for the next 20 years. Or they're one-time things that we just are going to knock off a punch list of the facilities and the educational program. Won't need that bolus of money coming, when there's a recession 5 years from now or whatever. So I don't know if you guys feel comfortable talking about your thoughts in any way at this point, because again, I'm springing this on you a little bit, but I've been talking about the fact I was going to ask you for a month. So any thoughts?
Well, ultimately, you want to work and lead a school in that you have student achievement and teacher retention, and that all grounds itself in school culture. So it's about building connected school culture within the school community and then with the greater community. And then, physically, yes, I would love a new roof on the west building, a roof on the east side of our building, functioning exhaust systems throughout the building. And that retains teachers because you're taking care of them, you're taking care of their space and allowing them to teach without worry. I think it would be helpful to create systems in our school in which special education and intervention were more fluid. So students who were receiving these services didn't even know they were receiving it because it was just so fluid in the classroom, and that means staff, which is impossible to get right now. And then you want to connect kids to their world. You want to connect their learning to the world around them so that when they're learning something, they see the ripple effect of their learning within their world and within our school grounds. And so I think we have this beautiful campus and the campus around our campus, the woods and such. And so I want to just continue that, but for teachers to have the ability to tap into that learning, they need support and they need professional development to do so. It's not as easy as outdoor learning is not taking a book and reading outside, right? And I don't want to dip into that. I want to make sure our teachers feel super supported. And I think why outdoor learning goes so wonderfully here in Grafton is they have a beautiful connection with the Nature Museum, with outdoor educators that are there to guide. I remember when you first moved here, that was a real bridge for you, and then it developed. So I think we need to create bridges for teachers to feel supported, to take other steps, to take their classrooms outside and to just engage students.
So some of my thoughts, I do think that our school is small, and that's been a huge struggle for us through this pandemic, is that we don't necessarily have the space. I don't know if everybody here has looked at like the inner office. So like the nurse doesn't have a window. I don't have a window. Our admin assistant does not have a window. So our access to fresh air is very limited. I have a rolly desk for days that I know that there's kids sneezing and I'm feeling cramped in the center of the building. I also, thinking about safety, we don't have a safe egress out should there be an emergency. When we talk about, practicing drills, it's like the three of us that are in the middle need a ladder or something to get up into the ceiling so we can adequately get out, because God forbid, an emergency happen in the front here, there's no exit. I don't know how it's even fits code. So that's a huge concern of mine. I'd love to put an addition on the building. I'd love to reconfigure this front space so that the admin assistant can see who's at the front door and isn't, so far away, and then can get out of the building. I think everybody deserves that ability to get out if you need to get out. So that's always on my mind. I'm really concerned about student social emotional right now. Everybody, no matter what their home life, has gone through a lot the past couple of years. I'd like to have a full-time counselor here at Grafton. I'm really concerned about the kids that I haven't seen for 2 years, not just academically, but social emotionally. We have some kids that are 7 and have never been in school before. They've just been learning behind a computer. And I think that while they're not in front of us now, we're not doing anything for them right now. Aside from VTVLC, I wonder how else we can support them socially. with their peers, because I think that's pretty isolating. So I worry about that. Of course, the air inside of our building, and then non-COVID related things. The parking situation is pretty limited. We just recently found out the Wyndham Foundation's not going to plow the second half of the back parking lot.
Well, that's
so
news to me.
So we've got to take that onto our budget, which I think is going to be fine. We're waiting to find out how much more that's going to be. So, you know, we can't all fit in here once there's a bunch of snow, and we are using the road just fine for dismissal. And I've talked to the neighbors, and everybody's okay with it. So that seems fine for now. But that's not going to allow staff to park on the road when we have a lot of snow, and we're gonna have to pay to plow the second half of the Wyndham Foundation's parking lot. They're fine with us doing that. That's what they suggested.
I have some thoughts.
So those are my things. And then Lynn had already mentioned it, but yes, right outside of the, you know, like the wall out here, but the whole outside of the building, when you walk around it, it doesn't look like the other buildings in town. It looks like it's falling apart. And so that needs to be prioritized too, but I think there's only like $10,000 in the budget each year for those big things, and it's more than that. So,
All righty.
shall I continue?
Well, I just want to, you know, when you ask, you risk getting an answer. And I assumed it would be, there's nothing here that's a surprise, except for the plowing. But Andy, this is your first out of the gate, with your 11 days of experience, and I know, you know.
So I agree with everything that has been stated already. One of the things, honestly, one of the classes I was taking this past year was actually on facilities, and so I had an ability to go around. It was during the pandemic time, so the maintenance guys were on staff, but you know, it was like one of the hybrid days. So I got tours of all the facilities.
Good.
And got to have, I'd say, a pretty frank and candid conversation with each one of our facilities folks in each of the buildings.
And that high school one was one of the further areas. All right.
And they didn't hold back. So the things that both Liz and Angela are talking about, they're not new. You know, the wall out there was pointed out to me, and some of the other stuff. So those physical plants are really important. I think some of the work that we're continuing to do that fits in with all of this, I mentioned last night with Focus Schools, which is that large group of folks that have been together, really kind of talking about recovery and whatnot. Brett Bishop, who is leading that for us.
Who's that?
His name is Brett Bishop. He's a consultant with Focus Schools.
I do know who he is. Yeah.
Is actually going to be reaching out, or has already reached out to the individual principals to start now shifting that we've kind of outlined the big chunk areas that the SU, you know, that we need to focus on student engagement, we need to focus on academics, and we need to focus on, you know, social, emotional, and stuff like that. So now we're going to start moving that granular more to the schools, where they're going to have an opportunity to talk just what Liz and Angela were talking about. How does it affect the whole? And then the idea is to bring that all together to then get down to where you're talking about with dollars, you know, is how do we then build those structures, whether they're physical structures or they are institutionalized structures to support our students and our staff. The other thing that we're going to be pushing out, hopefully in the next couple of days, is a parent and community engagement survey, which is part of the ESSER 3 or ARP, American Recovery Plan, that we're going to be pushing that out to start soliciting that type of feedback that you're just talking about, that everyone can start providing those feedback for their communities. Exactly what you're asking here, Jeff, is how that survey is going to kind of almost flow, so people can really give us that candid feedback, and then as a group we can start looking at that.
this technique is called envisioneering in my space, and it's called, you know, what is it, you know, without prompting is just most obvious to you, and then go from there, and then you start to sort of say, where is the relative value of these things, and how do they translate into program dollars or whatever, and then when the reality of the actual amount you have to spend hits, how do you, you know, what do you keep, what do you kill, what do you, you know, but you're doing it with open eyes and not just doing it because that's where you did it last year. And that's the key part here. That's all I've got on this for tonight, but I just want, you know, we've at least laid out some of this stuff, and thank goodness for Fact TV. We'll be taking notes from what we've discussed tonight on from you guys. And we're going to do a version of this at the high school and hopefully at the SU with your permission, Jessa, and see where that it lands us. I suspect they'll be different than this one, but this was a good one. I'm going to move us on without, unless there's an objection or questions, to item 6C, that old favorite that comes up every time we have an election. Westminster funding request. You're on.
Okay, I was at the select board meeting last night and was presented with this invoice. And I just have one copy, so I'll just summarize it. It was a November 13 additional tax bill that the town had to send out because in Westminster, the tax payments are in September and February, and the tax rate hadn't been settled because of delays in the state level, I think. So an extra tax bill had to go out. That is a $3,000 and some odd cost. Similarly, in October of 2020, that is a year ago, another similar amount of money. And then this invoice also includes some costs related to printing ballots and election coverage hours on the part of the clerk and so on. The total being $9,150. So that's, I think that what the trouble that the select board in Westminster sees is it wasn't none of this was budgeted items, so they're trying to figure out how to deal with it. So I'll present that. I have an idea, but I'll let you.
All right. Let us just say we've had some of these discussions. You know, 2019 wasn't really, we were even a district then, and the issue of the tax rate not being set by the state, I would send the bill to Montpelier for that, because it was they that failed on this point. In terms of election coverage, we asked for the election back in January, February, whatever it was. We offered to pay for items, but we said that we pay for them, and we offered to do the ballots. We put, you know, we covered the bulk of those expenses. Now it has to be said, and I don't see our town clerk from Grafton or Athens on this discussion tonight. Yes, but both of them also bore these costs, and Westminster was not exceptional in this regard. And what I would suggest you do is one of two things: either, you know, recognize that elections is a cost of being a municipality, and you know we appreciate what you've done, but it's not really a legally billable item. Or two, and this is just as acceptable to me, is to make sure that all the other towns who are affected by all this have an agreed on assessment that they'd like to jointly bring to us, so that everybody who spent money, extraordinary money on this, is compensated to the extent that they had them. And I'm sure that there are bills behind these that show all this stuff. So let's just have everybody, either nobody should do it or everybody should do it. It's sort of the principle. And this is what I had said the prior 2 times this has been brought up. And what I would say, 6 months from now if it comes up again. I don't want to speak for the board, but this is an item that we had looked at previously. And if any of my, colleagues on the unified board feel that I'm being unfair about this, please speak up. I don't want to be unfair. Go ahead.
So when I saw this, I generally agree with you. But when I saw this, I also, there was a person at the meeting who alerted me to the fact that, there have been some years, including 2020, when the town subtracted sort of extra expenses that resulted from kind of tardy information from the state, subtracted the expenses that the town incurred from what they sent on to the state, to the education fund. And that seems to me which in 2020 amounted to $9,123. And that seems to me an appropriate, because the bulk of these expenses are related to a lack of information coming from the state, therefore the tax bill had to be resent.
Right.
And I'm not sure that Grafton and Athens have the same issue because their tax payment times are
They did have it in Grafton. I think Athens does an annual, so it's not the same kind of thing. But they still had people. Jack Flynn was one of the people manning the polls on one of those elections, because I talked to her that day, and people did put extra time in, and we had at least 3 or 4 people in Grafton for managing the elections process. And I want to be fair to everyone. I just think that whatever we do, these weren't our budgeted expenses either. These were the ones that that Act 46 and just general knuckleheadedness at the finance office created for us. If the town of Westminster would like to bill the state of Vermont for the expenses and just general annoyance of dealing with this process, please let us know how that works for you, because we get one too. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Just a clarification from David. Is it correct that about $6,000 of that is based on tardy information from the state?
Correct.
Okay. And then the cost of printing ballots and such might be something that we ask the 3 towns to come together to assemble the information about and potentially bring it back to the WNUESD. But based on what you said also, 2 strategies are there. One is to ask the state to pay it, or the other is to reduce it from the payment to the state. Is that correct, based on what you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the ask the state to pay it is more or less the same as sending a little less money to the state than they would expect, which at least my town manager can't remember doing this, but according to the town report, that's what happened last year. Well, and that also was remembered by a person or two at the meeting last night. So it's a little bit of not entirely certain information, but in the town report, that's what happened. Right. It was an education billing fee that the town took out of its the payment that would have been expected by the state education.
Well, we'll also make a contact Kim and Darlene and say, you guys have your own laundry list. We'll see what it looks like and go from there. And if everybody be patient, so that'd be a reasonable way without you know, I'm disinclined to act on it because A, it's not in our budget either, and B, I don't think we're the trespassing party here. But we'll, Justin, maybe between you and me, we can go knock on Kim's door, and you know, if Wynn, if you next time you see Darlene, which is probably tomorrow, would you just kind of mention this to her as well?
Okay.
Sounds like we got a plan. All righty, moving on.
Can I ask something, Jack?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry.
I'm not 100%, I'm not super familiar with how all this stuff works financially with the town, but what I'm hearing is that there's consistently a glitch with their system and the educational system. And if we don't have power to change what the educational system is doing and Grafton avoids this problem, is there a way that our town needs to change how they're doing things so that they don't run into this problem every year? Like, I'm wondering whose problem is this and what's the way to solve it?
I think it's at least, I think it's a result of the fact that Westminster collects taxes 2 times a year, in September and in February. And the information about what's needed to calculate those tax bills can change between September and February, and especially with the with these changes and upheaval resulting from Act 46, that created some delays in information. So I think potentially Westminster could change its billing cycles to town taxpayers or something like that. But yeah.
As a point of information, Grafton does, I believe, I think it's 4 times a year. I have to go look at my checkbook. And I do think, you know, what I'll just say is that let's get the 3 towns to talk to each other, figure out if they've got a common problem and whose problem it is. I still think it's the states, but that's what I would say, right? So there you go. Since unless there is a motion to act upon this, I'm going to continue on with the next item.
I just wondered if David had a recommendation.
Yeah.
I think my recommendation would be to essentially I'll pass on the comments that I've heard tonight to the select board, and suggest that they do what they've done before, which is create this educational billing fee and take it out of what the state is expecting.
And I would say, you know, you are certainly welcome to add this as a item in your upcoming budget if that's something you want to do. Sorry. All right. Then I would, unless there is an objection, I'm going to move on to 7, which is unfinished business, and one of our favorite topics, which is free at last, 7A. Cheryl, you want to take us through what's happened?
Well, the State Board of Education did meet on September 15th, Wednesday, and they passed 2 motions. And the gist of that is that Westminster is officially approved for withdrawal from the Wyndham Northeast Union Elementary School District. And we always say it's not lack of affection or respect for Athens and Grafton. This is that Westminster has been on a mission for a long time to be its own town school district. And so the State Board of Education has approved that with some caveats around that, they appreciated. A case was made that was compelling about the need for Westminster to be represented with voting members at the supervisory union in order to address, for planning purposes, matters related to budget, which includes personnel. So that authority has also been given. Westminster has now, as of last night, seated 3 members, Charlie, David, and myself, on the supervisory union board to vote on matters within the judgment of the supervisory union board chair, I would say, that are relevant to budget and other planning purposes like that. So it's still the case that Westminster's school board does not take full authority until July 1, 2022. But in the meantime, the representatives of the town serving on the school board can participate fully in the planning process, especially related to budget matters. So, is there anything else I need to add?
I think that covers it. The 2 items that I might add briefly is the term of art state used when they gave you the 7/1/22 date was operational authority. And having spent a lot of time with, too much time with lawyers in recent years, the solution to that problem was to do a little retroactive definition of what operational means. And so we narrowed that definition to the only thing that they couldn't do are things that were sort of immediate day to day. So we've tried to give you all the broadest scope of authority. And Jessica West Clark, who is now the semi-willing chair of the supervisory union board, has complete authority to make that determination, and her judgment on the matter is final, so she can do anything she wants in terms of that. And we thought that was sufficient to move us on. This is as close as we could get to having them undo it without having to admit that's what they were doing. So that was the plan. It seemed to go through. Yeah, sure.
I'd just like to clarify that for the purposes of voting on this board, David, Cheryl, and I are not voting members, but Elise and Melissa are still the Westminster representatives of this board.
Of this board, that's
until
correct.
July of next year.
But you are the voting members of your own board.
Yes.
And we're going to run this. We're going to run this as we are, because this is pretty much when 46 happened. David will remember what we determined to do was to run this as a joint session on a forward-going basis until we could no longer do so. And I'd like, with everyone's permission, to do the same thing here. I think it's just easier, part of a good transition. And to be perfectly honest with you, when July comes, I want us to have some discussions not only between Grafton, the Westminster and the Unified Board, but just boards across the SU. One of the reasons why Act 46 is so popular among the Vermont Superintendents Association is because, believe it or not, people like Andy really do have home lives and they like to occasionally go to them. Mm-hmm. And it's really important that we do whatever we can to make this process not just you can just stay here. But we need to make certain that we're humane to our teachers and to our administrators, and we need to, if we're not consolidated, we don't want to be, we need to find ways to make these processes as streamlined, whether it's having every other month be a joint meeting of all boards, the way we promised in our alternative governance process. Something I'm very fond of as an idea. But let's find ways to coordinate and to take some of the sludge out of the system so that we can be more efficient and more collegial. With that said, that's all I've got except for this. This board is going to be a different board, both come March and come July ourselves. We're missing members. We have a governance structure, much like just as we have for the SU board. We need to adjust our interim articles of agreement to reflect it. Unless everybody's really fond of this horrible name, we have to pick one. I suggest that the select board chairs of the towns arm wrestle for which comes first, Athens or Grafton, but that's just me. And we have to redefine some of the processes. Like, are we going to have at large? Are we going to have votes by town? And we need to put that Andy, that's going to be an agenda item sort of from now till we get it figured out. So just put that on the list. Next is 7B, VLC. And who's got that? I know we have both some interest in and parents about going to VLC, and we had some questions about whether there was money to actually do any of this. So somebody want to help me out?
So,
Side.
I've been querying the AOE for 11 days now, and was able to get a solid answer from them that VTVLC tuition is an allowable allowable cost under ESSER. However, the strategy must be written in such a way that it's not, we're just giving one big lump sum to VTVLC, but it's on what is called a contracted service, which it's not abnormal what they're saying.
No, it just sounds like paperwork.
It's paperwork, and it's not something that's currently as a strategy in the grant. So it would be something we just need to add, so it's not a big deal. We'd have to project out what we think is funds that we would need available. The other issue, though, that exists is the question of equity across the SU, because the Rockingham School Board voted to not offer VTVLC to their students. So I don't feel like I can say, yeah, we got a solid solution answer, but the big holdup that I was told was it was not an allowable cost. I have found out that it's an allowable cost, and so
just calling, me a few calls to DOE, not the US one, and that was the impression I had gotten about this type of thing. I don't know how to address. No, I don't think that one district's unwillingness to do this should prejudice other districts' ability to service their students, but I understand the problem if, assuming that the chair is speaking to me, I can talk to her, but I don't know. I was talking to the chair of the SU board, maybe she can help me with this.
Why would
somebody's giving me that they can allow.
Why would that be an SU issue?
Well, because the fact is that we have equity can work one of two ways. It can either bring everybody up or can put a ceiling to squash everybody down. And the issue is, this is where we keep on running to this issue of wanting to respect individual board and district independence, but at the same time, we don't want to be in a position where we can't do something because District X wouldn't do it. And the question is whether or not there's a mechanism that they might find persuasive to at least allow in theory, even if they don't allow it in fact, so that we could get on with the ability to help our students. And
it is possible that the Rockingham board will reconsider if there is funding available.
Well, they have the same ESSER funding that we do, and so the question then becomes, are they willing to use it?
Well, we agreed in Grafton that we would pay for it locally if we had to, because there was a limited time for enrollment.
All that, but I'm just saying, we just need to all be on the same page, and this is some of that unofficial work that people do at the SU. And I would just ask you to maybe you and I can talk about it offline, but we just need to get everybody on the same page so we can help out.
Yes, so speaking of that, I was going to save it for director's comments, but if you could call me when you get home, VTEL has been having phone issues all day, come to find out. I haven't been able to call you. I thought it was your phone, but it's actually Vermontel.
All right. We'll make that happen.
Thank you.
All right.
So I just have a couple of comments about that. This one is, I think I know what the acronym stands for, but I'm not sure everyone does. So I think we should say what the acronym stands for, which I believe is Vermont something learning
Virtual
learning
Collaborative.
collaborative, and it's an opportunity for kids to be able to go to school remotely through this organization. And I think that one thing that we're making judgments about it, and I think we need to respect the Rockingham board's decision, or any board's decision, to encourage students to be perhaps in school instead of doing virtual learning. And I think we don't necessarily have all the facts to say this one thing is better than the other, but rather we're assured that ESSER funds can pay for this one particular option, which maybe some families in some districts would like to take advantage of.
It's mostly just, I don't want equity issues to if District X has 50 acres of land next door, and District Y is in an urban location, I don't want it to be said that because District Y doesn't have 50 acres, that District X can't put programs outside in the backyard and the backfield. And that's what this feels can be like. And I just want to make sure that we don't get walked into that kind of stuff, because essentially it means that our ability to act is limited by somebody else's unwillingness to. It's actually contrary to the idea of having independent districts. Yes. Why don't we start with Andy and then we'll walk.
Okay, so
in this direction.
the only, so there's two things. The grant funds don't come to the individual districts, they come to the supervisory union. So that's where I think the beginning of the conversation of equity of how we distribute funds. I fully appreciate and agree that School A may have needs that are different than School B within, even within districts, right? So we that is a piece there too. The concern that I have is we have some Rockingham residents who have made the choice to do VTVLC. And if we say we're only going to do VTVLC out of funds that were provided to the SU, only for Westminster or Grafton students, do we run some pushback or some due process issues from those parents in Rockingham? And I would want to just make sure that we have overturned every stone to make sure that we're not legally exposing the SU. And that's where my pause is. I think if I were to be asked my personal opinion, I think it is an appropriate use of funds, because there are some families that coming to school in person it could be traumatic for those families because of their fear of COVID.
Right.
And so if everything I know of ESSER funds, that would be an appropriate use.
Thank you.
I see a hand up. Joanne?
Andy, is it possible with this ESSER funds, if we set aside money for VTVLC, that we can then reimburse people in Rockingham that have chosen to go that route?
That is my understanding, yes. That we could put aside the funds. The reimbursement piece seems to be a little challenging. When I was talking with the state about it today, the state doesn't like to meddle into those issues that deal with district versus district. they like to stay at that more little, you know, a little higher level to say, yes, it's an allowable expense, and you kind of figure it out. So, but I will specifically ask about reimbursement for families that have made that choice, because they were just staying at the level of, yes, this is something that is an allowable expense.
I see Charlie, sorry.
I just would pick up on two things. One is, Andy, I think we wouldn't say it's only available to Westminster and Athens and Grafton. We'd say it's available to everybody, and whoever accepts or declines, that's their business. And I think the better analogy with the fields is that actually, since money is available, both of your towns have a 50-acre field. One of them is choosing not to use it. That shouldn't limit the decision of the other one to use theirs.
Get an argument for me on that. Jessa? Jessa, you got your hand up? Is that legacy hand up or?
No, I couldn't find the mute button, sorry. When you're talking, Andy, you mentioned Rockingham, and I know Priscilla had said that a number of families, I don't know the number, had asked about it, and the board said that they had elected not to provide that. And then somebody just said reimbursement. Do you have families in Rockingham that have elected to private pay for VTVLC?
I could not definitively answer that question right this second. I don't have that information in front of me, but can get that information.
Okay, because when you say reimbursement, especially to families that have private paid it, we're opening up a whole nother thing. Because VTVLC is also available as a private option and a private homeschool option. And that would be, I think, a discussion we don't want to have, but we might end up having, depending on what was told to the families that had asked for it. It's going to get really tricky because there's also options available for kids at VTVLC that are not available in the local districts.
We are on the 23rd of September, and school started what date again? I'm just concerned, you know, that we've got a limbo. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Thank you. First,
Daddy, he takes it. I'll take it.
An important discussion again, and I just want to add the context that we, the supervisory union and the participating districts, did embrace the Vermont Virtual Learning Collaborative option last year.
Right.
And then during this school year, it was not an official option, right? We now have learned tonight that the federal funding under ESSER for COVID recovery could cover these expenses. I think that information does need to be made available to all the chairs, including Rockingham, who may not know that at this point. They may not be aware, especially because Andy just had that verified today.
All right.
The other question I would ask, though, in your report, Angela and Liz, we have one student at Westminster enrolled in Vermont Virtual Learning Collaborative and 3 in Grafton. How's that working? What's the compensation? What's the model for money around that is what I'm actually asking.
We actually don't have like outstanding documents from VTVLC asking for us to pay them.
So just so we know, that's reported tonight. You're in touch with them. They're considered students of the Wyndham Northeast Union Elementary School District, right? So let's factor that in, Andy, as well, as you try to figure this out.
Just so I've got a go forward sentence here. What do we after we finish this in 2 minutes? What are we doing?
My recommendation would be that we get that we amend the grant, because we're going into have to amend it anyway. That we do an amendment to get the dollars there, and then kind of sort out I was just querying my contact at the AOE, that specific question that Jessa was asking about. If this had happened already, can we do this back retroactively, kind of thing, and figure that piece out.
I do agree that there's a can of worms that might get opened, especially with, you know, if a family chose to homeschool their child and then looking for some types of compensations and things like that. So, I mean, it unfortunately is not clean like it could be. The other piece is that we need to kind of think about is there's an ed fund money and reimbursement. It's kind of where you were going a little bit, Cheryl. There, you know, we get dollars for students, and if students are going to VTVLC, would we get those dollars, or would they then go to VTVLC or some other entity? So are they considered a Grafton student? Are they still considered a Westminster student or a Rockingham student, so that we still get our state funding?
Oh yeah, because if we don't have the state funding, we get penalized twice. We lose the student and we pay the tuition. That's not okay.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Justin, I don't know if that's a legacy hand up or you had some other question.
No, it's a new hand, and I'm totally fine sharing this information, and I think it's sort of a transparent disclosure item. My kid is one of the 3 in Grafton that is going to VTVLC. So when we're talking about these issues, if anybody thinks I should not vote on any of the expenditures, I'm totally fine with that.
In the chair's judgment, we have other people who send their children to school and they're serve on this board, and I do not consider it a conflict of interest. But if someone, you know, at some future point wants to challenge me on that, we'll discuss that then. But that's sort of my take on the subject. It's like being part of any other educational program. You know, your kid's on the bike club and we discuss the bike club. That doesn't mean you can't talk about it. So I hope that's satisfactory to everyone. Justin, before you came on, we had Andy had said that, you know, due to a variety of factors, we're not going to be able to get a vote in tonight on the memoranda of understanding. I'm not sure if are we prepared, or would we be better off to wait when we have our 5-minute meeting to also do the policy thing that the MOU is essentially written under. Do you need that tonight from us, Andy, or can we wait?
You're talking about the motion,
right?
The Rockingham motion.
Well,
that's what I've been calling it. So,
for lack of, yeah, why not? Which is their policy recommendation, and essentially the MOU is being written underneath it. I'm gathering it's as sort of as a process. I'm perfectly happy to wait a week or wait 5 days.
The Rockingham motion is much simpler, where the MOU is getting into some other pieces around it to try and kind of backfill. My recommendation would be, given where the staff vaccination rates currently are at the 2 buildings within the Unified Elementary, that I don't think that passing a mandate is going to force a staff member to go out and get vaccinated in that time, and that if we were to wait 1 more day or 2 more days, or whenever you guys need for that, I think that that's going to be fine. The other piece that an email popped up while we were having the meeting from Secretary French, there will be a trickle down of that being a mandate coming from the state through the, now that I said it, you probably want me to quote it, but it will be coming eventually through the OSHA Emergency Temporary Standard Plan,
that would be how I do it.
which is what Vermont is one of a few states that has a plan that falls into that. And so if OSHA, once that, what they call an ETS plan comes through, then the state has to fall into that piece of it and all public employees fall under the OSHA, under the ETS. And so therefore, teachers are considered public employees, as in other states, they might be municipal employees, they fall into the public employee. So therefore, the mandate would affect them. However, he's anticipating that we won't see that ETS until November, like around Thanksgiving, and then the state has 30 days to respond to that and has to have it, you know where it's going, right?
Right.
So you're talking January by the time that comes.
So that suggests to me that when we have our 5-minute meeting, we're going to take a look at the Rockingham motion as a policy. So, you know, we'll put that in the agenda. And 2, we'll hopefully ratify your MOU, assuming that it's not rewritten another 20 times between now and then by my colleague. All right.
Can I say one point?
Yeah.
The importance of the Rockingham motion isn't to change anybody's vaccination habits. It's to put in place the secondary condition, which is that anybody who's chosen not to must sign this declaration.
I think we're 100% on that, Troy.
That's why it doesn't matter. We're not trying to persuade anybody to change their mind.
No, well,
we're just to capture that.
Actually, just for clarification, the Rockingham motion does not mandate that they have to sign a declaration.
Okay.
That was part of the MOU.
Right.
The Rockingham motion, I'm not going to quote it verbatim, but was that they had to either show proof of vaccination by October 8th or begin the process by that date.
Yeah.
And then if they didn't, so anyone who didn't get vaccinated would have to submit to weekly testing. So that's it. It doesn't have, so that language that you're referring to was in the MOU that we're trying to draft.
The only reason why we're delaying on the MOU is because there were a lot of drafts flying around, and it didn't feel like there was consensus on what the language should be. And I want to give Andy time to get language that he's comfortable with, irrespective of anybody else's, so we can get the show on the road. And what I'm going to ask him to do is, when he's ready with that, we'll call a classic emergency meeting, and we'll do some iteration of the Rockingham motion plus the MOU approval. So that'll be the only 2 items on the budget, on the agenda, so everybody knows that. All righty, I'm going to scratch the building stuff because it's 8:30 and there should be a mercy rule. But we will talk about this more the next time. And you know, I may have an offline conversation with you, sort of your impressions about what needs to be done facility-wise, because we've got to just have some stakes in the ground on that. We should. Who of my Westminster colleagues is on the Buildings and Grounds Committee? I'm absolutely spacing who it is. So we had members.
I think you put me on it.
I believe I did, and especially since you just said so. Melissa, I'm wondering if in the next few days, if you might have a cordial chat with Liz and maybe even do a bit of a walk around just to gather some impressions of what needs to be done there, just so that our West colleagues have an idea how much money they're going to spend. I'm sure it'll be considerable. Yeah.
I'll have something with Liz.
That sounds wonderful. All right. Date and location of next meeting. Well, we don't know when the emergency meeting will be, but we do know that we have a budget meeting, and we're going to do this according to normal practice. We have the first meeting of the month that we try to avoid be the budget meeting, and the second meeting be regular business. So that would be second and fourth. So the second Thursday of the month in October. If you're ready, and you can tell me if you will not be, I would like.
13.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
So will you be comfortable? At least, again, I don't care about surpluses right now. I just care about sort of raw stuff, so we can start to work on this. And again, for the 100th time, a full budget rather than just the, All righty, so that will happen. That's what we're going to do. We'll have a emergency meeting as soon as the MOU is nailed down, and I'll get Andy's input on that. So those are the dates and locations. Next meeting physically would be logically over at Westminster, because that's our process. So I look forward to seeing you all there in person or virtually. We are on to director's comments, and I'll start with the folks on the board in front of me. Jessa, what you got?
Nothing. I'm all set. Thank you.
All right, Lynn.
All set, thank you.
Elise.
Everyone have a good night. I'm all set. Thank you.
Melissa.
4 for 4.
What was that?
I'm all set, thank you.
All right. Charlie.
Let's go home.
Good night.
Ditto.
All right. Amen. See you all next time. Excuse me. Sorry. I'm
We have an
sorry.
executive session?
Yes, we do have an executive session. God help us, we do. And I'm almost got us out of here. And this might be fairly brief, but I do want to just touch on it.
Let's get everybody.
Yeah, and let's get the people that need to be in on this very briefly.
Is there any executive you need to have?
I think I need at least our teachers and our superintendent or principals. Principals, yes. What did I say?